What I saw on Shark Tank the other week perfectly illustrated the toxic business myths that are burning women out left and right. Friends, we need to talk about it. Well, hey there, and welcome back to the Work-Life Harmony podcast. Today, I am really excited to dive into the 3 lies or myths, call them whichever you will, that we are constantly being told about entrepreneurship or running your own business. Now, even if you aren't an entrepreneur right now, this episode is still going to be worth a listen because some of these lies that we are being told are actually bleeding into other parts of our lives as well. And I think we really need to shine a big spotlight on it to have the awareness so that we don't fall into believing some of these lies and myths. Now, before we dive in, I would love to ask you a huge favor. If you can take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review here for this podcast and maybe even consider sharing an episode with a friend, that helps us to continue to be able to show up week after week and serve you. All right, so let's get going. Now, the other night I was watching, I think it was a rerun of Shark Tank. I've always loved Shark Tank. I think it's a fascinating show. But there was this one deal and I got so angry and it fired me up. My poor husband got an earful from me and it made me realize like we need to start talking about this. So here is what was happening. There was a college-age student, young man who was incredibly well-spoken, came in and came to Shark Tank looking for a deal. Now, if you're not familiar with the show, this is when entrepreneurs come and pitch in front of a panel of other entrepreneurs, and they're asking for an investment in their business in return for part ownership. So he presented everything about the business. His numbers were impeccable. He was highly profitable. Everybody, every single shark, every single investor on the panel had nothing but amazing things to say to him in terms of what he was able to do and how great this business is. It was clear this was an amazing investment opportunity. However, he did not land a deal. And here's why. Now, 2 of the sharks passed because they just said, hey, I'd love to help you, but this is not an area that I have any expertise or value to add. I understood that, appreciate it, good on them, right? But the other sharks, who did not have one piece of negative feedback for him, said, here's why they weren't willing to make an investment. He wasn't all in. He wasn't hustling enough. One of them said, well, you're not doing this full time. You're still in school, which tells me you're not going to be successful enough. This isn't good enough. They weren't valuing the numbers. They were valuing whether he was willing to sacrifice it all, right? Now, right before this one, a couple came out asking for an investment. Their numbers were nowhere near what these guys' numbers were, right? They did not have all of the amazing data to back their business. And they got a deal because guess what? They were broke. They had slept in the garage of friends' houses. They proved that they were willing to sacrifice everything. That's what got valued, was the sacrificing of everything instead of the actual data behind the business. And I've seen this more than once on the show, and I've seen them create this messaging of like, if you're not in full hustle mode where you're running on 1 hour of sleep and caffeine, you're not a true entrepreneur. So today I want to talk about that along with 2 other lies. And friends, if you are a woman as I am, it's really important that you listen in here because let's face it, if reality is reality. If you are a woman who is also a caregiver, I'm the primary caregiver in our home to our daughter, sacrificing it all is not an option. It's simply not an option. So what they're subtly sending messages out every time, they say this on TV is anybody watching is hearing, oh, well, I guess that means I can't be an entrepreneur. I can't sacrifice everything because, maybe I've got kids here. I'm a mom, right? So here is lie number 1, which is exactly what we've been talking about. And it is this, that a real entrepreneur, a truly successful entrepreneur, has to sacrifice everything. And if you're not, that doesn't make you a good enough or a successful enough entrepreneur. And friends, that's complete BS. All right. But unfortunately, that's not what is typically highlighted, right? We love a rags to riches story. And because we love a rags to riches story, or maybe because that's been somebody else's journey, they only value that or recognize that one path as a quote, true entrepreneur. Now, if you look up the definition of the word entrepreneur or business owner, nowhere in there does it say, this is someone who sacrificed it all. This is someone who is broke, living in debt before they became successful. All right, so I'm here to tell you that is a complete myth and a complete lie. Now, what I didn't mention at the start of this episode is this is actually going to be part one of a two-part episode. All right. So here today, and I've still got two more lies to share with you. We're going to be talking about these lies. Now, next week, I want you to come back because we're going to now talk about what is reality, right? If we're putting a spotlight here on the lies, well, then what is possible? What can this look like? Now, I am here to tell you, I am living proof that this lie number one, that you have to sacrifice everything, is not true. I have been building the business called the Pink Bee here for just over 5 years. Not once has this business ever been in debt, ever. We've never carried debt. And I have never had to, quote, sacrifice everything. Not once. I have never worked more than a 25 to maybe 30-hour week on a rare occasion. And none of what they love to show as a sacrifice needed to happen in order to build this business. And I know plenty of other business owners who are the same. So now let's move on to lie number two. So lie number two is that real entrepreneurs, or like the most successful entrepreneurs, have some kind of overnight success story, right? And that is the norm. And I guarantee you, you've seen some flavor of this out there on some kind of a social media highlight reel or an ad or something, right? Where someone is highlighting, oftentimes the rag to riches, right? I was broke. And then I had this great idea. And 3 months later, I was making $25,000 a month, right? That's one flavor of it. Another one that I see a lot with people running online businesses similar to myself is they will go highlight and publicly share, I just did this huge event and I made $500,000 and I'm going to show you how you can too. But what they're talking about was the money they collected, and they're never sharing the expenses put into it. So maybe they did collect that $500,000, but maybe they spent $400,000 in expenses to get there, right? So we get sucked into this perception of an overnight success story. And so what happens then is maybe you have a desire to start a business and you have an event and you don't make $500,000. And so you instantly think, oh, I can't do this, right? I'm not a real entrepreneur. The overnight success story, 99.9999% of the time, and this is me just making up a number, is not true, right? What they're not often sharing, well, it's one of two situations. They're either not giving you the whole picture, or it is such a one-off, right? That again, we're not getting the whole backstory of how they were able to do that. For example, I've seen people who have a massive following from a previous endeavor, and then they launch a business and they do really, really well because they already had a massive following. Right. I mean, you even look at someone like a Sarah Blakely who, built Spanx, had a huge following, sold it. Now she's launched her new company, Sneaks, and it's doing really well. Well, she had a massive following. She wasn't building from ground zero. I mean, it's a new business, but she already had that reputation. Now, I really love to hammer on this one here, the overnight success story, because here at the Pink Bee, we've been getting a lot of visibility over the last several months. Our business has grown to a size now where people are sharing it openly. We're getting a lot of free PR and press. And someone actually reached out to me recently and said, I'd love to interview you to hear about this overnight success story. And I wrote back and I said, I'm not an overnight success story. I'm little over a 5-year overnight success story. But that's not the fun part, right? All they hear is, oh, here's this person who's generating 7+ figures of revenue a year. Like, oh my gosh, she came out of nowhere. No, we didn't. We've been building this consistently, slowly, and steadily for over 5 years. So if you are, either thinking about starting a business or currently are, I want you to realize don't have this expectation of I started a business and 2 months later I was a billionaire. That's really not the realistic journey that's out there. Now, at the beginning of this episode, I did also mention, hey, even if you're not an entrepreneur, I want you to think about, what we're going to be talking about bleeds into other parts of our lives, right? I think this idea of instant gratification, instant success, we're being shown that in so many ways. We feel like we need that in all parts of our lives, right? So this isn't just about entrepreneurship. Now, the third lie, so we've covered lie number 1, right? That you have to sacrifice everything. Lie number 2, that there's got to be some kind of overnight success. No, there doesn't. And lie number 3 is an interesting one. And basically what we are mostly seeing or sold is this idea that in order to grow a business into something significant, there are only 2 options. Option number 1 is to take what you're selling and sell a lot more of it. Yes. Or option number 2 is to take what you're selling and increase prices or add something else that people then have to spend more, right? So you either need to sell more or increase your prices. Now, I'm not saying intrinsically that either one of those statements is necessarily wrong, right? You kind of think of it very as a line on a graph. It's a very linear growth strategy. So a lot of business coaches are working with entrepreneurs and basically zeroing in on that. They're like, okay, well, you have this thing that you're selling. It's great. So now you have to sell more. And unfortunately, here's where it breaks down. One of the only ways that people often know how to sell more is to work more, right? Because think about it. Fundamentally, if you're an entrepreneur, as am I don't have an MBA. Most entrepreneurs don't, right? We haven't been trained in business savvy. We've never run a company before, right? We don't understand all the operational infrastructure. So the only way we know, or a lot of times other business coaches who also don't have MBAs, who've never run large companies, the only way that they know how to, coach you into growth is to be like, okay, we're going to sell more, which means you have to work more. Or, okay, if you're like, oh my God, I'm tapped out, I can't work anymore. And they're like, okay, well, now we need to create a product that costs way more or increase your prices. Now, I'm not saying those aren't strategies that may not be appropriate at certain times, but here's the problem with both of those. Eventually, you hit a wall. Time ends. You'll hit a point where you simply cannot work more. And if the only way you can make more money is by you working more, because essentially you're selling yourself as a service or you are the one doing every single part of the business, you're going to hit a plateau, which means that growth cannot be infinite. And friends, that is also a complete lie. There are more than 2 options to really growing a company. All right. It doesn't only exist on working more or adding higher priced products. We are living proof of that here at the Pink Bee. Now, when we look at these 3 lies that were being sold over and over again, you got to sacrifice, you got to be an overnight success story, and you're ultimately either just going to eventually plateau because you're going to run out of time, or you're going to price yourself out of the market because you just can't raise your prices anymore, right? What happens, and what I'm seeing happen all the time, is one of 2 things with business owners, especially with female business owners. The first outcome is eventually you burn out. And I have seen so many business owners over the last 18 months either go on hit the pause button and go on like a 6-month sabbatical because they're like, you know what? I've built a business I hate because I'm doing all these things that I don't love anymore and I'm exhausted. And so they're going on sabbatical, they're hitting the pause button and they're taking a step back going, I'm exhausted. This is not sustainable, right? or they're closing it altogether. A lot of women that were building businesses with me when we started in 2020, a lot of them have closed their doors and they had built really amazing businesses, but they have also completely tapped themselves out and got to a point where it just wasn't sustainable. And that is one of the costs that happens when you buy into this. You've got to sacrifice everything. You got to get there as fast as you can, and you just work more and more and more. Now, the second thing that's happening, the second cost of buying into these myths is that then if you do choose to stay in business, you plateau and you hit a wall. You're like, well, I don't have any more time. I've hit the max of my, what I can offer from a price point. So I guess this is as big as this business can get. And for most entrepreneurs I know, the business is not about the money. It's about the impact. And so this means that a lot of women are left feeling frustrated because they're missing out on the opportunity to make the impact that they really want to make. Because they're like, we've plateaued. I can't grow this anymore because I've maxed out the time I can work and I've maxed out the increase of prices that I can do. So this is it. This is as far as this business can go. And it may be successful. They love what they're doing, but they're feeling like they're missing out, right? They're like, I want to serve more. I want to do more. Now, I'm here to tell you there is another way. All right. That is not the one and only recipe for successful entrepreneurship. What if I told you that here at the Pink Bee, this year, our projections are amazing. This is going to be by far our largest year ever with the same small team. We haven't added any new people to our team, and we are maintaining the same profit margin. Think about that. That's pretty powerful. Now, I've said we haven't added any people to our team. The people we have are not working any more hours either. All right. Now, what if I also told you that this business grew to a point where it was making 7 years in revenue in a given year, selling one core product without raising its prices every single year? All right. So, that's kind of interesting, but we've certainly seen that here. Now, next week on part 2 of this episode, I am going to kind of pull back the curtains and share something I never really have. Again, because I'm here to serve in all things time management, organization, productivity, and planning for women. That's my passion. However, because the Pink Bee is getting such visibility right now, I have a lot of women that have desires to have their own businesses or grow the businesses that they're in, starting to reach out to me and asking me more about how did you do this, right? How are you able to continue to grow this business year after year without working more hours, without adding more people, and without sacrificing on your profits? And so next week, for the first time ever, I'm going to be pulling back the curtains on really sharing the 5-year journey here at the Pink Bee, what it looked like, exact data in terms of number of hours worked, number of people on the team, what did our revenue look like, what did our profit look like, what strategies did we put in place? Because I want to share with you next week what I consider to be our secret weapon here at the Pink Bee. And no, we did not sacrifice everything. No, it did not mean we didn't become an overnight success story on one significant event. And it did not include adding more time and increasing costs. So if you want to hear about this secret sauce and what I believe our secret power is here, and it's one that is not being talked about enough in entrepreneurship, because I'll be honest with you, it's not as sexy sounding, all right? But it is the make it or break it, I believe, for anyone that really wants to grow a business they love and do it in a sustainable way. So I'll see you back here next week.